and catch me on Jeff Mitchell's EDL Radio on blogtalkradio.com. There's
no surrender ever,
because truth is not always pleasant.
Broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, a mere 2 miles from the state capital, the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon Radio Show can be heard every Tuesday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. Pacific and 11 p.m. Eastern, only on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com to listen. You can also watch on the SHR Media Facebook page and the SHR Media YouTube channel. No goldfish were abused in the making of this ad. Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And good evening once again, and welcome back to Money Talk with Melanie. We are entering the second hour. I hope you enjoyed the first hour with Christine Parakis, Esquire. She talked to us about creating a record-breaking year for your business in 2019. So if you missed it, go back and listen to it. It was pretty good stuff that she had to offer. I met her at the National Publicity Summit in Manhattan about a month ago, which in Manhattan, you know, I keep forgetting that my show is worldwide, and I actually, when I look at the demos, I have listeners all over the world, and I'm grateful for them. So I should probably mention that Manhattan is in New York. Manhattan is in New York, as in New York City, although I think everyone knows where Manhattan is, right? But that's where I met her, and my next guest as well, Rod Wallace, Ph.D. Very excited to have him on the show. He's going to talk to us about drowning in potential, how American society can survive digital technology. Now, I found this to, of course, be an interesting topic. My audience knows this well about me, that I'm a really pro-techie chick. I'm a bit of a tech freak. I teach it. I love it. I use it as much as possible. And even though my cybersecurity expert tells me it's a very bad thing. Hello, Andy in the Facey chat. I even love by the way, it's an Amazon Echo. Can I just say this? Like, I'm also a technology snob. I need to address a couple of things, okay? When you're on Twitter, you are tweeting. You're not twittering. You're tweeting, okay? Can we get that out of the way? And also, your Amazon Echo has a prompt, which is Alexa. It's not an Alexa, it's an Amazon Echo. People are like, I have an Alexa. No, you don't. You have an Amazon Echo, and the prompt is Alexa. Just like my technology snob in me. Like, even on the news, when they talk about the Amazon Echo, they call it an Alexa. And I'm like, it's not an Alexa. It's an Amazon Echo. Stop calling it that. And stop saying twittering. It's tweeted. Stop. You're making me crazy. Okay. That's just my, technology OCD kicking in. I'm sorry. I just had to go there, people. I apologize for all of you people. You should know this. So now, you can sound like you're tech savvy when you're talking about Twitter. You can say, I tweeted the other day, or did you see the president's tweet? Not did you see his Twitter? No, that's not what we're saying. We're saying, did you see the tweet? Okay, I'm done. Getting off my soapbox about that. And it's an Amazon Echo, not an Alexa. Anywho, my guest today is Rod. My guest for the second hour. Oh, goodness gracious. Doug in the Facey chat says it's an NSA listening device you pay for. Thank you, Doug. Doug and Mike Fitzpatrick. Yeah, but guess what? If somebody comes in and takes the business diva out, they will have a record of who took me out, so you guys can prosecute him and send him to the gas chamber or whatever. So there's a plus side, and you know, me and Mike Fitzpatrick, my cybersecurity expert from NCX Group, we're going to chat about that a little bit as we talk about cybersecurity in business. We are going to talk about that in the open when he's here on the 30th, which is next week. So. But my next guest is Rod Wallace, Ph.D. I am excited to talk to him about technology, and I like, I like to talk about the not so positive parts of technology, which there are some downsides to the technology. So I'm looking forward to talking to him. Without further ado, Rod Wallace, Ph.D., how are you?
Hey, Melanie, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you're very welcome. I apologize for not picking up. It said it came through as the Marriott, and I was like, the Marriott in D.C.? And I stay in D.C. a lot. I'm like, what did I leave there? What did I do? Like, that's what
You bet. No. I'm here. I wanted to make sure that we had a good landline, and the Marriott here in Washington, D.C. was exactly where I needed to come to get it for you.
Oh, sure, yes. I've been there many times. I'm politically active, and I find myself in the D.C. area quite often. I am familiar with that Marriott. So when I saw it, I was like, did I leave something there the last time? Like, why are they calling me? Or I thought it was a promotional call, which I never give this number out for. So I was kind of wondering, like, what happened. But thanks to the magic of Google Voice, I was able to read your voicemail and and see that it was you. So, yes.
If we call it Alexa, then we get to think of it as a friend of ours, and that's just much more human. And it makes this big evil thing called Amazon into a human that we can talk to and have conversations with and feel much more comfortable with ourselves for doing it.
You too, Dr. Rod. You too.
Oh yeah, you bet, man.
Can I call you Dr. Rod? I didn't ask if I could.
Sure, yeah, call me whatever works for you.
Okay. Okay. My cybersecurity expert just warns me about the perils of my Amazon Echo all the time, but I don't listen, and also about Google as well.
You bet.
I'm like, I know Google, like, don't be evil. Meanwhile, I have like 100 gigs of storage. I'm trying, but I'm addicted now. I need like rehab.
Oh, yeah. We have to use this stuff. I mean, this is part of our life. This is our society right now. If we don't use it, it's like we're like, you might as well be on an island all by ourselves. It no longer works for us to not use this stuff. It's
true. It's very true, and we need some like decent competition of some sort, but. Who's going to do it? Because Google's paying off both sides of the political aisle, and we know that's where most of the stuff happens. So it's a problem.
Yeah, no, I mean, we just have to recognize that the leaders of these companies are the royalty in the United States right now. And we just think about them as leading our society in the direction that they recognize and that they realize that they want us to go in, and we'll probably be a lot better off.
That is true, but that's a reality that people don't want to, like, at least I acknowledge that, like, I know. I don't know if that makes it worse because I'm kind of supposed to know better, but, which I legitimately know better, and I do it anyway. But I think, like, for example, I switched to DuckDuckGo as my browser. I'm going to keep it real with you. DuckDuckGo is okay, but it's not Google. It just isn't.
We just really can't do without these things, and the real challenge is that it's not just a direct thing. That we have all these direct things that are problems. That face to face and our real interactions with people are breaking down, and we are losing the real connections with those people that we want to have closest in our lives. And that is one of the direct problems with Siri and with Facebook and some of the other things. But then we have all these indirect problems as well, that our life is just way more complex than it was 50 years ago. And how do we deal with that, which leads to a whole other set of problems on top of the first set?
It does. And I won't. I can't argue with that. And, coincidentally, I teach in the same high school that I attended many moons ago. But it gives me, the school is exactly the same. Like, it hasn't really expanded or anything like that. Like, it's pretty much the same. And so it reminds me every day when I'm there, like, what used to be and what is now. Like, I can literally see it from a visual standpoint. And it's kind of, creepy to see how we've progressed, but then not progressed at the same time. You know, one of the things that we talked about is how, and in the information you sent me, you said that 60% of the American economy, the GDP, which is referred to as the GDP, you hear that all the time, the gross domestic product, is dedicated to industries that are failing to deliver the basics. And I think we couldn't agree more. Healthcare, education, finance, food, housing, and more. Healthcare, I'm a public school teacher. I complain about the public school system constantly. Like all the time. I'm tenured though, so I can do that. But I complain about it all the time because I do believe it's not doing its job. I think anybody who has health care, which is everyone, understands that they're being underserved in some kind of way. And what made you draw that conclusion, even though we have all this technology?
Well, I went systematically through American culture and our government and our economy, and I just looked at a number of industries one at a time and to try and understand what was going on. And it really threw me because initially I was expecting, there's problems in our world. We all know that. But what really blew me away is that every single industry that I looked at, one after another, was failing. And I mean, education is one where a teacher that I was doing some research with sent me some information. I was like, well, help me understand what's going on in our educational system, because since 1970, the cost of American education, public school before college, and then, of course, the cost of college, have increased about 107, 110% per year. And it's both across the board and without any achievable, measurable outcomes. And this teacher that I was talking to, she said, look, she teaches first grade. She's like, every other week she has 4 kids who are behind grade level for first grade, and they have to take a standardized test. I was like, well, tell me about that test. And she said, look, every other week she has to take these first grades, these 6-year-olds who are behind grade level, and they have to go to the computer, and they have to key in a 9-digit code for the school ID, a 5-digit code for the test ID, and a 4-digit code for their own personal identification.
That sounds right.
Yeah, you bet. And these are for the 6-year-olds who are, behind grade level. And I just think, I'm sure that the rest of the class is sitting back very quietly, and while these kids are doing this. No, they're not. These are first graders, and it's probably taking a half hour every other week. And I'm sure there's some value to it to a certain degree for those specific 4 kids who are behind grade level, but you get that testing, and then you get all the other testing, and we're layering all of this stuff on top of each other, and without really realizing everything else that is on top of the teachers. And so you end up with, what is the real situation? That you get, everyone's getting paid, but Raheem still can't read? It's absurd that we have this. And it's in education, it's in healthcare, where you can think about, 86-year-old Betty's been in New York Central Hospital for 3 hours, and she's sitting under a sheet shivering because all these well-educated people with amazing technology who went into healthcare because they care, but they're so busy that they don't realize that there's this 86-year-old woman on the side of the quarter just sitting there shivering. And, over and over again, walk into a supermarket and just stop for a second. You walk into a supermarket and just look around. It is amazing. I mean, people who come to the United States from outside, they're like, oh my gosh, your supermarkets are just brilliant. Because there's 47,000 foods in the average American supermarket. It's spectacular, but they don't nourish us.
It's true. I was thinking about, I saw a commercial. I don't know if anyone else has seen this commercial, but I saw a commercial for a wine cork or a wine opener where you stick it goes down into the wine, into the cork, and you can pour the wine, and then you can re-cork it so that the wine stays fresh. Now, that as a wine connoisseur myself, it was like, that sounds fabulous. And then I thought to myself, wow, we're really doing well in society. I mean, the commercial for it is like, there's nothing better than that first sip of wine, blah, blah, blah. But, God forbid I have to sip day old wine. And I'm like, what? You know what I mean? Like, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, so this is where we are in America. Like, we actually legitimately have time to complain about our wine not being as fresh as it was the first time we opened the bottle. I just feel like there's kids who are starving, and we have a product. Like, there's probably people all over the world who are going to get that product for like $50 or whatever it is. It's like kind of ridiculous when you think about it.
It's beyond ridiculous. Well,
right.
It's spectacular that we have the most amazing technology ever right now, and we can optimize that first sip of wine, Melanie, that is just slightly off for you. I know that there are probably a half dozen people who can make it better for you.
Right.
Because we have specialists in everything, and every little part of the world is getting optimized in an amazing way. And it really is spectacular. I mean, even Siri, just the technology of being able to, more or less, understand what we're telling it, and sometimes at least giving us information that we want. That's awesome.
Sometimes I'm like, Siri, do I have an accent? Like, what is your problem?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, well, the wine probably helps with that, I'm sure.
That's probably true. And then, then I feel like I'm not speaking. She makes you feel like you're not speaking English properly, and perhaps I should be enunciating better and have a better command of the English language. Her and Alexa are like little English teachers, really. They're like, what?
They are, you bet. They teach us when we are wrong with our own language, you bet.
Exactly. I'm like, okay, Siri, I did not say that clearly enough. My apologies. Now I'm apologizing to a robot. Wonderful. Like,
yeah.
It's not a good deal. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's just, the real problem is not the technology itself. It's that we're becoming so specialized and so knowledgeable about all these little niche things, and we're trying to optimize that first sip of wine when the really big picture questions that we all need to work together on to fix, those are getting messed up again and again and again.
And why is that in your estimation? Like, what is it that we're ignoring? How do we keep messing it up? Like, I think we all probably agree that, like, the education system the public education system definitely needs some fixing. The healthcare system definitely needs some fixing. And I feel like a lot of us even know, like, what needs to be done, but it's not getting done. What do you attribute that to?
Well, a lot of this has to do with the fact that everyone is simultaneously trying to fix something. This is it. I mean, we got thousands of people. So pretend that you and I are, we're going to make a painting together, and we're going to, put blindfolds on, but just use one canvas, and we're going to start painting. And I have, like, some vision of, some modernist art of, like, some antelopes running across the plains, and you at the same time are trying to draw on the same canvas, but you're trying to draw, some elegant thing of a family sitting down at dinner, and it doesn't work. It ends up with this nasty, nasty thing because we're conflicting with one another, and it's just not aligned. And in a lot of ways, that's what's happening. A friend of mine was just talking about how she was helping someone get funding for college, and she had lots of different this woman has lots of different opportunity to get funding for college, but they're all over the internet with $200 here and $800 here and $455 there if you happen to be lucky enough to be able to apply for it. And so all of these people are well-meaning, but it's ending up a mess without getting any real benefit. And at a higher level, that's the same thing that's happening with our healthcare system. We have amazingly dedicated healthcare employees with spectacular technology, but most of them don't have any clue what each other is doing. And we're ending up at cross purposes. I mean, in education, what is even the purpose of our educational system? I don't know that many people can even answer that.
We don't have a common purpose. It's very funny that you say that. I had a guest on not too long ago that was talking about they have schools for kids who have learning challenges. And in schools, like for those particular kids, like supplemental schools.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And, one of the things that they said, and I've certainly experienced this as an educator, is that public schools are not there to fix the learning problems. They're there to teach a specific curriculum. No one has ever, and I've been in education for now over 20 years, in public and private school, and no one has ever articulated that point as clearly. And to your point, no one has a purpose, and no one has ever said that out loud. But if you look closely at the education system and how it operates with that particular set of students and other subsets of students, you would see that to be absolutely true, that they don't fix problems, they manage them. And I think parents think that we fix them, and we don't.
I think a lot of parents think that a school is where you drop your kid off until they become an adult, and then they're magically going to be a wonderful adult. But what exactly? And I mean, that's what some parents think. Other parents, I think, think that that schools are there just to teach a limited number of things. Other people think that schools are there to really be almost a daycare. But all of those may be the right answer. I certainly don't know what the right role is for a school, but if all these different people are creating schools, are trying to improve the schools, but towards a completely different vision, it's really, really ugly. I think about the state of Delaware, where we have, like 120,000 students, something like that. We have 19 different school districts. We have, something like 30 different private schools. We've got, parochial schools. We've got a bunch of kids that are homeschooled. And all of these different systems are being operated by different leaders who have their own vision of what schools should be doing. And each one, or many of them, are really amazing, and they're using the technology to improve things and get things better, and they're each coming up with their own ways to get to their outcome, but they're all creating a painting on the same exact canvas of the state of Delaware's kids, and the fact that they have different visions of what they're trying to create is creating a big, fat mess.
No, I think you're right about that. I think you are right about that. And the thing is, no one, there's no one, how can I put it? There's no one place to kind of go, so to speak, where there's no one common place that says this is the goal of all schools. You know what I mean? There isn't, there's nothing like that. And I don't know that we should be doing that either. That's what makes it complex. Now, perhaps what we should be doing is, at least in the public school system, maybe we should be saying that there's one, federally, there's a common goal. I don't know, because then you get into, the Constitution and states' rights, and, you get into all that kind of stuff. So it's and I feel like you get into the same thing with the healthcare system and with the food system. That's where it ends up going when it comes to decision makings, and then enter technology. And yikes. And
it all comes down to, there's this balance that we need. On the one hand, we need competition. I mean, there are a handful of people out there who are saying, oh, the world has become so complex that we no longer need a free market. And, well, good luck trying to operate the world without competition today and without a free market, because it's never, ever going to work. It's way too complicated. Where you're finding that we're getting more progress, though, is in terms of where we have people across organizations getting clarity of what is the vision they want. And one example that has worked, that's a few years into it, is the cocoa and chocolate industry. I like chocolate.
Yeah.
But one thing that they found is that, about 70% of the world's cocoa is grown in Western Africa, especially the Ivory Coast and Ghana. But the Ivory Coast in particular has huge, huge problems with very limited levels of education. I mean, there are farmers there where one of the Western agricultural experts who was visiting the Ivory Coast was telling me a story about this farmer, and he's had these trees that were there, and he was really limited education. He was finding that some of his trees were sick. He could recognize that, that the trees are just, they're dying. They're not giving any cocoa. And so he went to his village elders, and he said, well, what can we do? These trees are sick. And so he did exactly what the village elder said. He tied a blue ribbon about 5 feet up off the ground around the trunk of the tree and said, well, just pray to the blue ribbon, and your trees will get better. It didn't work.
Okay. I was waiting. Does it?
Yeah. It didn't work. And in fact, more of his trees got sick. But this level of complete lack, and this is his profession. This is like his family is depending on this. And there's, problems with child labor. There's problems with, people deforesting the entirety of the cocoa trees in entire regions. Massive social issues. And the chocolate and cocoa industry said, look, we're dependent on this region, which is a mess. And there are hundreds, if not thousands, of different people who are doing their best to solve the issues, and they've been trying for generations. And they've had very limited, if any, material success. So the cocoa and chocolate industry said, look, as an industry, we are going to set a clear vision of what we want. We want to help the cocoa farmers become more prosperous, which means educated, etc. We want to make sure that social values are preserved, and we want to make sure that environment is conserved. And there's probably 10 or 12 things that need to happen. So, things that will have a material difference, like giving the cocoa farmers some basic training. And the industries, the different businesses who are participating, each pledge to take some actions to help make each of these 10 or 12 things happen, to improve basically the society of 1.4 million cocoa farmers in Western Africa. And they're having a material impact. It's not easy, it's not trivial, and these folks compete with each other at the same time, in terms of, you've got the Mars bar and Nestle's Kit Kat bar, and you can buy either one at the store. But at the same time as they're competing tooth and nail with each other for our business, they're all also working together as members of the World Cocoa Foundation to help solve basic fundamental societal problems.
Interesting. That is very interesting. Now, of course, that's private sector.
You bet.
Very difficult to do that on a government level because there's conflicting interests.
There's conflicting interests, and at the end of the day, if you look, without a doubt, you're completely correct. The government right now is frozen except when corporate interests take an aligned effort in a particular direction. Our cultural institutions, wonderful. They can do some amazing things. Our churches, our synagogues, various movements are fantastic. But who is the leadership of society today? It's business. And when business takes a coherent, concerted movement in a particular direction, we move in that direction.
Well, that's true, and that's free market, and that's frankly also the argument for less government in our lives in general. That you just made the argument. I freelance write for the Horn News website, and one of the things I was tasked to do was to write an article on how many regulations had been cut in the Trump administration. Now, the first thing I had to do was figure out how many regulatory agencies we had and how many, regulations we had on the books. I thought that was going to be super easy to do, particularly since, I'm an academic. I do research all the time. It was not easy. And what I finally found out was that the government, our United States government, has no idea how many regulatory agencies we have, nor do they have an accurate count of exactly how many regulations we have. They have estimates because they are literally making regulations so quickly and so many that it's too many to count. It's too big. Now, if our government is too big, I feel like we need a memorial of some sort to stop it. But you have all these agencies. It is insane. I was like, why can't I find a quick number on this? Like, I should be able to go to like whatever.gov and get the number, whatever it is, right?
It's spectacular. And, the thing that really amazes me is, the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA,
right,
is one that, we all know what it does, right? At its core, it's there to support farmers and maybe some agricultural research. Well, as I was doing research for my book, Drowning in Potential, How American Society Can Survive Digital Technology, and there's a chapter on government. And it turns out that there's over 100,000 employees of the FDA right now. And some of those employees, they have a drinking game that they play where they'll get together and one person will say, okay, the FDA does this. They scare geese outside of airports so that they don't get sucked into jet engines. True or false? And if the other person who also works for the FDA gets it wrong, then, they have to drink. It's a drinking game. And there are seriously people who play that game and they get it wrong. And by the way, yes, the FDA does actually scare ducks and geese around airports. That's one of the roles that they have. And the roles that they have are just amazingly broad between all the core stuff that you know about. They're also in charge of, animals with rabies and figuring out what to do with that. They're in charge of monitoring dog fighting. I mean, the estimate that I saw, and I don't know what you have found, Melanie, was that right now we have about 250 million constraints at the federal level on what we do and don't do. I mean, that's amazing. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was. We make, it's something like 8,000 new regulations a year. 8,000 a year.
Right.
Ridiculous.
And each of those regulations has multiple pieces in it. You can't, wire money directly to Peru, Bolivia, or Argentina. I just made that up. But
right.
Yeah.
Well, here's what I don't understand, and I've been saying this for years now, that with technology, why is it that when we make new laws, we can't go in, when we pass new legislation, we can't go into the computer somewhere and say, okay, instead of having people battle it out in court, we can't go into the computer and say, while we're at it, we're going to put into this law, this takes away, these 10 laws. This law supersedes these 10 laws that are also associated with this new law. We can't be efficient that way. It seems to me we should be able to be efficient that way. But instead, they just make new laws, and then there's some conflict, and they end up fighting it out in court, and it goes to the Supreme Court or something. To me, it just feels like that's really a dumb and inefficient way to do it.
It's a crazy system right now, but if you think about it, this is what's happening all over the place in terms of the impact of technology on society, that actually throughout human history, at least for the last 5,000 or 10,000 years, most societies that develop new technology fail to use that technology effectively to actually benefit its citizens. So what's kind of happening is that, Melanie, suppose that you and I are digging a ditch. We each have wood-handled shovels, and you tell me, look, you dig on the left and I'll dig on the right, and that works. Well, now let's suppose that all of a sudden we shift technology and we're going to switch to jackhammers. Well, jackhammers make a whole lot of noise. So even though there's nothing inherently different about the jackhammer, you can't talk to me. You have to use hand signals. And we have to change the way that we are managing how we coordinate if we want that good outcome and nobody with a bloody toe. Well, right now, the digital technology is basically creating a huge amount of noise coming into the atmosphere in terms of masses of data, masses of numbers of people that need to be involved in everything for it to be successful. And we're not able to coordinate. And that noise is meaning that we're ending up with a lot of bloody toes.
No, you're right about that. But you would think that it's funny that technology does not help that. You would think that technology would alleviate that. In my mind, it seems to me that we could use technology to alleviate that situation.
Technology doesn't solve problems. People solve problems, and we solve them more effectively when we are working together. And that's one of the things that we miss, is that technology is a bunch of tools that is there to help us execute whatever system we're really trying to execute. And anytime we put in a tool without really thinking about the impact on the full system, we're going to end up screwing up our system unless we've really thought about, well, what's the new way in which we're going to collaborate? Do we need to use hand signals in order to collaborate right now? And right now we're not.
We're not. We definitely are not. And you know, whenever I hear something new, some new conflict coming up, I'm like, well, did no one think of this? And what's really funny about that, at least from a policy perspective, in my estimation, is that, you know, my master's is in public administration, and that's supposed to be what public administrators do, actually. Like,
right.
They're supposed to do. So when I learned that, I was like, someone is falling down on the job, because no one's doing this. Like, no one's doing, pre-program studies on whether or not this new regulatory agency is needed, and no one's doing studies on, like, a year out whether or not this agency is productive or still needed. Like, those studies are not being done, and if they are being done, no one is taking action on them. And if I had to guess, as someone who's involved in politics, it's probably because it's not in the law that they have to. So somebody's making money, somebody's got a job that they don't want to eliminate, and it's not in the law that they have to eliminate it if it's not productive.
Well, it's even more than that, just because the world is too complex for government to understand right now. I think about, I was living in Europe, and I was working in the food industry, and one of the technologists said, hey, we found 3-monochlorpropane-diol esters in baby food. And I was like, what? And they're like, no, this is really serious. And, you know, we ended up with this big, long conversation between, you know, the makers of the baby food, and then the regulators came in and said, oh my gosh, you have esters in, so should we stop and ban all the esters? No, you can't ban all esters. Esters are different than both. And as we've learned so much about technology and what we can do, government can't understand that. Maybe in the 18th century, 19th century, even the 20th century, government could really understand what was going on. But right now, the things that all of our people in business are doing is so complicated that you have to be deep in it. And government isn't. And they can't be.
No, they can't be. But they need...
Exactly, Melanie. I think you just summarized it perfectly.
I summarized it all in one, like, grunt, didn't I? I have to go to a quick break, but when we come back, we're gonna start talking about how it might be possible, maybe, for leadership to do that. And you already described it being done in one industry, but perhaps we can talk about how it can be done in other industries. Is there anything as a people we can do to encourage that direction? Because I think you're right. If we're all, you know, going in different directions, how can we, you know, improve things? I don't think that we can. So I'd love to talk about that on the other side of the break.
You betcha.
All right, absolutely. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. I'm your business diva, Melanie Collette. My guest this hour is Rod Wallace, Ph.D. I've nicknamed him Dr. Rod today. He's allowing me to do that. I really do appreciate it. So great information today. We're discussing drowning in potential, how American society can survive digital technology. And if you missed it, if you guys are in the Facey chat, I did post a link to where you can purchase that book on Amazon. You should definitely check it out. We'll be back in a few moments.
Right now, you can get the credit you deserve. Just visit MrCreditRepair.biz. Let their expert credit repair specialists remove late payments, charge-offs, collections, even old bankruptcies, fast and easy. That's MrCreditRepair.biz. Why go anyplace else? Increase your credit score today. At Mr. Credit, you always get a quality service, all at an everyday discount price. Stop getting turned down for cars, credit cards, or even new homes. Visit MrCreditRepair.biz today. That's MrCreditRepair.biz. Your credit repair is our #1 priority.
Making a living can be tough these days with so many jobs going overseas. If you love numbers and puzzles and want shelf security, you can become a tax specialist with an amazing 6-month tax course from Tax Mama. Operate your own tax practice locally or anywhere in the world where there are American taxpayers. It's a great way to write off your trips to visit family for months at a time. Everything you need to pass the IRS 3 special enrollment examinations is included in this course. Visit irsexams.school. And if you need more than 6 months, that's okay. Take your time. You're in the course until you pass the exams or until you unsubscribe and reject Tax Mama's emails.
In the American Dictionary of the English Language, Noah Webster 1828 edition, the meaning of the word race is defined as a series of descendants, indefinitely. Thus, all mankind are called the race of Adam. Hello, I'm Ron Edwards. On today's page from the Edwards Notebook, the word racist means one who hates another of a different race or skin color because of their difference in appearance, place of origin, or existence. Thus, when I hear President Donald Trump espouse the need to stop illegal border crossers from coming into our republic and systematically wreaking havoc, it never occurred to me that he is racist or hates non-white people. The truth is, the president is seeking to do what every homeowner does daily to protect the entryway into our country and protect us from harm and preserve our American republic. The United States has been accepting far too many legal immigrants and illegal border crossers, thus endangering the unique, exceptional nation status of our beloved USA. Of course, leftist Democrats label those who actually seek to protect our sovereignty as racist bigots. But actually, it is they who are the bigot ones against America and are doing the bidding of George Soros to destroy America from within via illegal border crossers. I'm Ron Edwards. Don't miss the Ron Edwards Experience Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific on AmericanMatters.us and Sunday midnights on Talk America Radio. Sponsored by the Tri-County Liberty Coalition.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. I'm your business diva, Melanie Collette. My guest the second hour is Dr. Rod Wallace, Ph.D. He's talking to us today about drowning in potential, how American society can survive digital technology. And we're discussing how while technology has made some things easier, it has also made some things, many things actually, very complex from a more broad perspective. And I never attributed that to technology. I, of course, attributed that to people just being stinky. But I think, I think, just stinky at their jobs. Just saying. But I think there's some truth to what Dr. Rod is saying here about that, and that's what we are discussing. So. You talked about how the cocoa industry managed to be able to do this and that it's worked well for that private industry, for the companies that have chosen to participate. Before we actually move on to how other industries might be able to do it and maybe even do it in the public sector, is there any data on how companies who chose not to be a part of the, the World Cocoa Organization?
World Cocoa Foundation?
World Cocoa Foundation?
It's well over 90% of the industry right now.
Okay.
So all of the major players are participants, and I don't know the handful that are not. What's really going on with them.
That makes sense. Whenever I'm always just like super suspicious of those kind of things. Like, if it's a probably isn't really such thing as like a mom and pop cocoa farm, right? Like there's.
Oh, there is. There are.
Are there?
A lot of those. A lot of the cocoa and like the chocolate bars that you'll find, just Guatemalan chocolate. Well, I mean, there's like almost no cocoa grown in Guatemala, and so if there's like a special chocolate bar that's just from them, it's like some niche. Most frequently, it's some niche little side stream that's going on from Guatemala direct to your local, five and dime store. So yeah, there's a lot of niche companies that are out there. Most of those, or many of those, are also participating because if they really, going to sell expensive chocolate, well, they want to do the right thing as well. But
That makes sense. Well, no, I was just thinking in terms of, like, I wonder how much it costs to be a part of that organization, whether or not all the companies that are involved in the industry could actually afford to be a part of the organization, like what was required. That's the thought that was on my mind, and whether or not, because of whatever expense or criteria or regulation was involved with that organization, whether or not some businesses just could not be involved, if that makes any sense.
It does make a lot of sense. However, most of the money that is spent in Western Africa actually is spent by the companies themselves. Only, I know, for example, the Cargill Corporation, that they published their books about how much they're spending in this area, and I think it was over 20 million euros, so well over $20 million is being spent on this effort in Western Africa, and a way less than $1 million is being spent on the World Cocoa Foundation itself. This is primarily private companies that are finding it attractive to do things that are good for society, because when you solve a problem, you create value, and you want some of that value to go to your shareholders, and some of the rest of that value goes to society.
That's very true. Now, is there any incentive, or are there too many conflicts? Do you think it's easier to do this kind of thing when the industry is primarily abroad than it is to do here in the United States? Just simply because, we tend to be over-regulated in every industry. So,
the regulation is a mess. In the United States, as we've talked about,
right?
I think it's probably best that I just summarize saying, the Ivory Coast government is not some pristine, wonderful thing that helps, their society end up in a wonderful, positive place.
Listen, that's what I was getting at. That's what I was low-key kind of trying to say, but...
yeah. So, there's a lot of hurdles no matter where you're going to go about doing good and trying to run your own business. And without a doubt, the United States still remains a wonderful place to run a business relative to most places you could be in the world. And we can definitely do types of initiatives that will benefit shareholders and society at the same time. I'm working now with a group focused on extending the family is the name of the initiative. And what they're trying to do is reduce the gap between the African American community and corporate America.
Amen.
Yeah, and what they're saying is that a significant portion of this problem is about cultural misunderstanding. Look, that we have many different cultures across the United States, and yes, there are many subcultures within the African American community, but still there is an African American community that is different than the one that I grew up in,
and frankly, the one that I grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm African American, and you try to explain this to people, and they don't. A lot of people don't. From a government perspective, they certainly don't understand this. They lump all African Americans in together, and I try to explain that the African American woman who, my stylist, who's from Senegal, who may have grown up in the United States, but her family is from Senegal. They've had a different experience than I had growing up in Cape May, New Jersey.
Right.
So did the African American girl or woman who grew up in Southside Detroit. So she had a different experience than I did growing up in Cape May. All cultural, but we're all brown. But you can't. But the government tends to treat us the same, and that's a problem.
It's a huge problem. And what this initiative that we're working on, Extending the Family, and that's on hsrn.com, is about trying to say, look, if you want to bridge the cultural divide and really get to some understanding of what, Melanie, you're saying about there's different cultures within the African American community, there is one similarity. You guys have the same skin color, and that's about it. And yet there's differences of experience that from people who have different color skin is saying, well, how can you get into the African American community? One of the strongest places is on the historically black college and university campuses. And I've gone to a couple of the football games at the HBCU, and they're awesome. They're wonderful football games, but it feels different. When I look around, it's like, oh, yeah, there's a few other white people in the crowd, but there's not a lot. And it gives you a different cultural perspective. The conversations that you have tend to be a little bit different. It gives you an idea of, gee, you can grow up in the United States and have a different experience than the one that whatever it is that you did. And so this initiative is saying, let's bring representatives of corporate America into the HBCU campuses, particularly around athletic events, and bring some further cultural events around that, and just get some quality conversation going about what is there, so that benefit for companies is better, deeper understanding that can improve recruiting, can improve marketing, can improve selling of their products into the African American community. While the African American community gets some funding for the schools and the education, they get better and broader opportunities for recruitment, etc.
No, I think you're right about that, and I've always also thought though that you find more commonalities among socioeconomic classes than you do among color, and I really wish that when we had all these initiatives that we would do it that way, because I would guarantee you that poor African American communities and poor white communities have a lot more in common. So if you You understand what I'm saying? So if you
definitely.
If you use geographic location and economic levels, for lack of a better expression, rather than race as your demographic, I think we would be a lot more productive in reaching people, in my opinion. Because I think, like I said, I think the groups are larger that way, and I think the issues, even if you live in different areas, are more common.
I think that there's a lot to say for your perspective that doing things according to socioeconomic class, particularly in the United States today, where socioeconomic class is getting so different between the experiences of the people with the greatest amount of wealth and the least, and just the way that we view the world. At the same point, I think that you can get to some of the same outcomes when you say, well, look, if you want to get an understanding of the multitude of experiences and those red threads that have similarities across the African American community, you want to get them. Maybe you can get them in black churches, which is one subset of the African American community.
Yep.
But where you can really get it also is at the historically black colleges and universities, many of which are only 60-70% black.
Right.
But they still have this thread of African American cultures which have blended together, leading to something that is distinct and different from downtown Dallas or Wilmington, Delaware.
For sure. Absolutely. I'm in New Jersey. I don't know if you knew that or not, but I'm in New Jersey, and I lived in Philly for a while, so I'm very familiar with that area. With Wilmington, and actually I love Dallas. Dallas is fantastic too. It's a beautiful place. We are almost done. I can't believe how quickly that went by. Where can we reach you? Where can we buy your book? I did post the link to the Amazon link. Is there anywhere else we can purchase your book, and any way else we can meet you?
Yep, you can go ahead and on Amazon is the easiest place to find me, wherever it is. So it is, Drowning in Potential, How American Society Can Survive Digital Technology. You can also reach me at rodwallacephd.com. That's rodwallacephd.com. I have a weekly email that's sent out and a lot of information up there for you. So that's right.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Great information. Really great conversation. I'm so glad that I had you on the show.
Thanks a lot, Melanie. I really enjoyed the past hour talking with you.
I did too. I posted the link to your website in the Facey chat, just so you know. And are you on Facebook at all? Because I couldn't find you.
I've just started out on Facebook from a professional perspective, so I'm there, but barely.
Twitter?
Even less than Facebook.
Okay, well, I will send you the link to your podcast. via email. I will, because I did look for you, but I couldn't find you. But I will send you the link via email, just so you have it.
You betcha.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, I loved it, Melanie. Thanks
Absolutely. So did I. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. I'm your business diva, Melanie Collette. That was my guest for the second hour, Rod Wallace, Ph.D. Dr. Rod talked to us about his book, Drowning in Potential, How American Society Can Survive Digital Technology. Really good conversation. I thought, anyway, it was very interesting. The first hour, if you missed it, I had Christine Perakis, Esquire, talk to us about how we can create record-breaking business in 2019. Excellent conversation as well. I want to thank everybody in the Facey chat, all your good comments and questions. You guys completely rock. Everyone out there in SHR Media Land, thank you so much. If you downloaded this as a podcast via iTunes, thank you, thank you, thank you. And on all the other platforms in which you can find Money Talk with Melanie, because I am indeed everywhere. You cannot escape. If you would like, you can follow me on Twitter at Money Talk Mel or at NJGOT. Let me say that again, at NJGOP Diva. And if you want, I do have a website. It's just not as dynamic as I would like it to be just yet, but there is a moneytalkwithmelanie.com where you can get all of the archived Money Talk with Melanie shows and get more information about my sponsors, the Tax Mama and Mr. Credit Repair.biz. Thank you so very, very much for listening. Have a fantastic weekend. And remember, all of this is very important because after all, it's your money. Have a great weekend.